Prison food. How inmates survive on it every day. Every prison day begins the same way. Not with violence, not with chaos, but with food, or what passes for it. Before lights fully rise and long before anyone speaks about survival, a tray is slid across steel, plastic utensils rattle, and a decision is made in silence. Eat, trade, save, or refuse. Inside prison, food is never just food. It is energy. It is leverage. It is routine. And sometimes, it is the only thing standing between a person and collapse. From the outside, prison meals look simple. Measured portions, bland colors, identical trays. But on the inside, every item carries meaning. Calories are counted mentally. Protein is memorized. Portions are inspected the way currency is inspected on the street. One missing scoop can change an entire day. Because prison is not designed for comfort. It is designed for endurance. Inmates quickly learn that survival depends on understanding the food system. When meals arrive, how often they change, which days are better than others, which meals can be stretched, saved, or traded. Hunger does not announce itself loudly at first. It creeps in quietly, affecting focus, mood, and judgment. And hunger changes behavior. Some inmates eat everything immediately, afraid of the next shortage. Others ration, breaking meals into pieces to last longer. Many trade bread for protein, dessert for favors, instant meals for protection. What looks like scraps to the outside world becomes a complex economy inside. Food also controls time. Breakfast marks the start of the day. Lunch divides the long stretch of hours. Dinner signals lockdown and survival through the night. Miss a meal, and the entire rhythm of the day breaks. Lose access to the commissary, and survival becomes harder almost immediately. For new inmates, prison food is a shock. The body reacts before the mind does. Energy drops. Weight changes. Digestion struggles. What once felt normal on the outside becomes impossible on the inside. And there is no choice menu. No alternative. No opting out. You eat what you're given, or you don't eat. Over time, inmates adapt. They learn which meals to trust and which to avoid. They learn how to combine items into something filling. They learn how to survive on repetition, day after day, year after year, without variety, without control, without enough. Food becomes emotional. A bad meal can start conflict. A good one can calm an entire unit. A shortage can trigger tension that lasts all day. Guards know this. Administrators know this. Food is not just nutrition, it is management. And yet, despite the system, survival continues. Men and women inside prison learn how to live on what they're given. They learn how to protect their health with limited options. They learn how to make food last when time feels endless. They learn how to survive, not because the food is enough, but because the human body is forced to adapt. This documentary is not about taste. It is not about complaints. It is about daily survival, about what prison food really is, how it affects the body, how it shapes behavior, and how inmates learn to live on it every single day behind bars. If you think prison food is just bad meals, you haven't seen what it does over time. This is the system no one sees. This is the routine everyone lives with. And this is how inmates survive on prison food, one tray at a time. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. What prison food really is and why it's designed that way. Prison food is not accidental. Every portion, every ingredient, and every schedule is the result of policy, cost, and control. Across most prison systems, meals are designed to meet minimum nutritional requirements, not comfort, satisfaction, or long-term health. Calories are calculated to keep inmates functioning, not thriving. Protein is rationed. Fresh ingredients are limited. Variety is rare. The goal is consistency and cost efficiency above all else. Budgets drive everything. Feeding thousands of inmates 3 times a day is expensive, and food is one of the easiest places for prison systems to cut costs. Bulk purchasing, processed ingredients, and repetitive menus keep expenses predictable. Taste is irrelevant. Texture is secondary. Nutrition is reduced to numbers on a chart. This is why prison food often looks the same week after week. Meals are built around starches because they are cheap and filling. Bread, rice, pasta, and potatoes dominate trays. Protein appears in controlled portions, sometimes in processed forms that barely resemble meat. Vegetables are often canned or overcooked, stripped of freshness long before they reach the tray. For inmates, this design becomes obvious very quickly. Hunger isn't just about quantity, it's about quality. A tray may technically meet calorie requirements while still leaving the body undernourished. Energy crashes become common. Weight fluctuates. Some inmates lose weight rapidly. Others gain it from excessive carbohydrates and lack of balance. The timing of meals matters just as much as the food itself. Breakfast often comes early, sometimes before sunrise. Lunch may arrive hours later, followed by a long gap before dinner. That final stretch between dinner and the next morning is where hunger settles in the hardest. For inmates without commissary access, there is nothing to fill that gap. Survival becomes mental as much as physical. Food is also a tool of control. Meal schedules regulate movement. Trays dictate when doors open and close. Miss a meal, and there is no replacement. Lose privileges, and food options shrink immediately. In some facilities, disciplinary measures include restricted diets, still legal, still nutritionally adequate, but intentionally unpleasant. Guards understand the power of food. Administrators understand it even more. A well-timed meal can calm tension. A delay can increase frustration. A reduced portion can send a message without a single word being spoken. Inside this system, inmates learn quickly that food is not guaranteed comfort. It is conditional stability. New arrivals often struggle the most. Their bodies are still adjusting to stress, confinement, and loss of control. Appetite changes. Digestion suffers. The shock of the food system compounds the psychological impact of incarceration. Meals that once felt normal outside now feel foreign and insufficient. Over time, adaptation begins. Inmates learn which meals provide the most energy. They learn which foods to save and which to eat immediately. They learn how to make combinations work, bread with protein, starch with starch, just to feel full longer. Survival becomes strategic. This is the foundation of prison food culture. It is not about enjoyment. It is about endurance. Every tray represents a balance between cost, control, and survival. And once inmates understand that food is designed to sustain the system before it sustains them, they begin looking for other ways to survive on it. That is when prison food stops being just a meal and becomes a system you either learn to live with or suffer under. How inmates learn to survive on prison food. The first lesson prison food teaches is simple. What you're given is never enough. New inmates usually discover this within their first week. At first, hunger feels manageable, almost temporary. The body is still adjusting to stress, fear, and exhaustion. But as days turn into weeks, the pattern becomes clear. Portions stay the same. Menus repeat. Energy drops. And the realization settles in that survival will require strategy, not patience. Inside prison, food stops being a meal and becomes a resource. Inmates quickly learn to observe. They study which days offer slightly larger portions, which meals include protein, and which trays are mostly filler. Breakfast might come with a small scoop of eggs or cereal, but lunch and dinner are where survival decisions are made. Eat everything now, or save something for later. Trade part of a meal for something more filling. Skip a low-value item to avoid wasting energy digesting it. Nothing is automatic anymore. The commissary becomes the dividing line between comfort and struggle. Inmates with money on their books can supplement meals with ramen, tuna packets, peanut butter, crackers, or instant rice. Those without funds must rely entirely on state meals. This creates an immediate social divide. Hunger is not evenly distributed. Survival depends not just on the food system, but on access to alternatives. For inmates without commissary, creativity becomes essential. Bread is saved and dried so it lasts longer. Starches are combined to create a feeling of fullness. Meals are broken apart and eaten slowly to stretch time and satisfaction. Some inmates train themselves to eat less during the day so they can endure the long gap between dinner and breakfast. Others eat everything immediately to quiet hunger before it becomes distracting. Trading is another survival mechanism. Food becomes currency inside prison. A dessert might be traded for a piece of meat. A bread roll might be exchanged for soup. Commissary items are often broken down into smaller portions and traded across days. These exchanges are rarely written down or spoken loudly. They operate on trust, reputation, and quiet agreement. But trading comes with risk. Owing food can lead to pressure. Disputes over portions can escalate. In some units, food debts are taken seriously, and failing to repay can damage standing or invite conflict. Experienced inmates know when to trade and when to refuse. Survival is not just about hunger. It's about avoiding unnecessary trouble. Cooking in the traditional sense doesn't exist, but assembling does. Inmates learn how to combine items into makeshift meals using hot water, plastic bags, and patience. Ramen becomes a base. Crushed chips add texture. Canned meat adds protein. Seasoning packets become valuable. What starts as scraps turns into something closer to a real meal, not because it tastes good, but because it fills the body longer. This process is about control. In a system where almost nothing is chosen, controlling food preparation, even in limited ways, restores a sense of agency. It allows inmates to feel involved in their own survival rather than passively enduring it. That sense of control matters more than flavor. Food also becomes emotional. Bad meals can ruin morale. A consistently poor menu can increase irritability across an entire unit. Hunger sharpens tempers, shortens patience, and lowers tolerance for stress. Guards and administrators understand this dynamic. That's why food quality and timing are carefully managed, not to nourish inmates, but to maintain order. A well-fed unit is quieter. A hungry one is unpredictable. Over time, inmates adapt physically. The body adjusts to fewer calories. Hunger signals dull. Digestion changes. Some people lose weight quickly, especially early on. Others gain weight as starch-heavy diets replace balanced nutrition. Health outcomes vary, but the common thread is adaptation. The human body finds ways to survive, even under constraint. Mentally, the adaptation runs deeper. Food becomes something to plan around rather than enjoy. Inmates think ahead constantly. What's tomorrow's menu? What can be saved today? How long until commissary? Meals anchor the day, dividing long stretches of confinement into manageable segments. This constant planning is exhausting but necessary. Over months and years, inmates develop personal systems. Some rely heavily on commissary and avoid prison food whenever possible. Others accept the system fully and focus on endurance. Some mix both approaches, depending on access and circumstance. There is no universal solution, only what works for the individual. What's often misunderstood on the outside is that prison food survival isn't just about hunger. It's about dignity. Being unable to choose what you eat, how much you eat, or when you eat strips away autonomy. Survival strategies around food are attempts to reclaim small pieces of dignity in an environment designed to remove it. And yet, despite all this, survival continues. Day after day, inmates learn how to live on what they're given. They learn when to eat, when to save, when to trade, and when to go without. They learn how to listen to their bodies and how to ignore them when necessary. They learn how to survive on prison food, not because it is sufficient, but because they have no alternative. This is the reality behind the tray. Not taste, not preference, but adaptation. And once inmates master survival, they begin to notice something else: how food changes behavior, relationships, and power inside prison itself. That is when prison food stops being just a necessity and starts shaping the entire social structure behind bars. What prison food does to the body over time. At first, the body reacts loudly. New inmates often experience hunger that feels sharp and constant. Energy drops quickly. Headaches become common. Sleep is disrupted. The combination of stress, confinement, and sudden dietary change hits the system all at once. For many, the first weeks inside feel physically harder than expected, not because of labor or violence, but because the body is adjusting to a new kind of scarcity. But prison is not short-term. What matters most is not how prison food affects the body in the first month, but what it does over years. Prison meals are designed to meet minimum nutritional standards on paper. Calories are calculated. Basic vitamins are accounted for. But long-term health is not the priority. Consistency and cost are. This creates a diet that may keep a person alive, but often fails to keep them well. One of the first noticeable changes is energy. Inmates frequently report chronic fatigue. Days feel longer. Physical tasks feel heavier. Concentration becomes harder to maintain. The combination of high carbohydrates and low-quality protein leads to energy spikes followed by crashes. Meals fill the stomach, but they don't always fuel the body effectively. Protein deficiency plays a major role. Protein is essential for muscle maintenance, immune function, and overall strength. In prison meals, protein portions are tightly controlled and often processed. Over time, this can contribute to muscle loss, slower recovery from illness or injury, and general physical decline, especially among inmates who perform physical labor or exercise to manage stress. Weight changes are common, but not predictable. Some inmates lose significant weight, particularly those who arrive already thin or anxious. Others gain weight rapidly due to starch-heavy meals and limited access to fresh foods. Diets dominated by bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes, combined with inactivity, can lead to fat gain even when portions feel small. This contradiction confuses many people on the outside. How can someone feel hungry and still gain weight? The answer lies in nutrition quality. A body deprived of balanced nutrients often stores energy inefficiently. Blood sugar fluctuates. Metabolism adapts. The body learns to hold on to what it can, even when intake feels inadequate. Digestive health also suffers. Sudden changes in diet, lack of fiber variety, and reliance on processed foods can cause chronic stomach issues. Constipation, bloating, and discomfort are common complaints. Hydration becomes another factor. In some facilities, access to clean, cold water is limited or inconvenient, pushing inmates towards sugary drinks from commissary when available. Over time, these issues become normalized. What starts as discomfort becomes routine. Inmates learn to live with constant low-level fatigue, digestive irregularity, and physical stiffness. The body adapts not because conditions improve, but because adaptation is the only option. Mental health is affected as well. Nutrition and mood are closely linked. Diets lacking in variety and essential nutrients can worsen anxiety, irritability, and depression. Inside prison, where stress is already high, poor nutrition amplifies emotional strain. Small frustrations feel bigger. Patience shortens. Emotional regulation becomes harder. This is one reason food has such a powerful effect on prison behavior. A slightly better meal can lift morale noticeably. A delayed or reduced meal can sour an entire unit. Over long sentences, inmates become acutely aware of how food affects their mood and focus. Many structure their day around eating not just to satisfy hunger, but to stabilize their mental state. Health conditions complicate everything. Inmates with diabetes, heart disease, or gastrointestinal issues often struggle the most. While prisons attempt to accommodate medical diets, options are limited. Special meals may still rely on the same process base, simply modified in portion or content. Managing chronic illness on prison food becomes an additional survival challenge layered on top of incarceration itself. Aging inmates feel the impact more severely. As bodies age, nutritional needs change. Recovery slows. Muscle mass declines naturally. In prison, where food quality is static and physical strain accumulates, aging accelerates. Many long-term inmates experience health problems earlier than their counterparts on the outside, not solely because of age, but because of prolonged nutritional stress. Exercise becomes a coping mechanism. Some inmates work out obsessively, trying to counteract poor diet with physical activity. Push-ups, walking laps, improvised weightlifting. These routines serve both physical and psychological purposes. Exercise restores a sense of control and temporarily boosts energy. But without adequate nutrition, results are limited. The body can only compensate so much. Others conserve energy instead. They move less, rest more, avoid unnecessary exertion. This strategy helps manage fatigue, but contributes to muscle loss and stiffness over time. Survival becomes a balance between preserving strength and avoiding exhaustion. What's rarely discussed is how prison food reshapes a person's relationship with eating itself. Food stops being about pleasure or nourishment and becomes something closer to strategy. Inmates eat based on timing, availability, and impact rather than hunger cues. This mindset often follows people long after release. Former inmates frequently report difficulty trusting food, regulating portions, or recognizing hunger and fullness normally. The body remembers scarcity. Even after release, many continue to eat quickly, save food unnecessarily, or feel anxious when meals are delayed. Years of adaptation do not disappear overnight. Prison food leaves a physical and psychological imprint that extends far beyond incarceration. From a systems perspective, this is not considered a failure. Prison food is doing exactly what it was designed to do: sustain life at the lowest acceptable cost while maintaining order. Long-term health consequences are rarely addressed unless they become emergencies. Prevention is not the priority. For inmates, the body becomes another battleground, a place where survival plays out quietly, day after day, in fatigue, digestion, weight, and mood. There are no dramatic moments, just gradual change, slow decline, or careful adaptation, depending on circumstance and resilience. And through it all, the tray keeps coming. The same portions, the same balance, the same system. Prison food does not break the body all at once. It wears it down slowly. And as inmates begin to understand what it's doing to them physically, they also begin to see how food shapes something even more powerful inside prison: relationships, hierarchy, and power. That is where survival becomes social. How food creates power, hierarchy, and conflict behind bars. Inside prison, food does more than sustain the body. It organizes the social order. Once inmates learn how to survive physically on prison food, another reality becomes impossible to ignore. Food determines status, influence, and vulnerability. What someone eats, trades, saves, or controls can quietly place them higher or lower in the informal hierarchy that governs daily life behind bars. This hierarchy is not written down. It is learned. At the bottom are inmates with no commissary access, no outside support, and no ability to supplement state meals. They rely entirely on the tray. Every missed meal matters. Every portion reduction is felt immediately. Hunger makes them visible, not in appearance, but in behavior. Fatigue shows. Irritability shows. Desperation shows. Above them are inmates with limited commissary access. Maybe a small amount of money arrives occasionally. Maybe a family member sends support once in a while. These inmates can smooth out the worst gaps, adding a packet of ramen, a spoon of peanut butter, or a snack between meals. They're still vulnerable but less exposed. At the top are inmates with consistent resources: commissary funds, connections, experience. For them, prison food becomes optional. The tray is still eaten, but survival does not depend on it alone. This difference, access versus dependence, creates power. Food becomes currency. A single commissary item can carry disproportionate value. A ramen packet may be worth far more than its price. A tuna pouch can be traded for favors. Coffee becomes one of the most valuable items in some units, not just for energy, but for comfort and routine. Sugar, seasoning, and hot sauce gain importance because they transform otherwise bland meals. These exchanges create informal markets. Some inmates trade occasionally. Others specialize. They collect items, break them down, redistribute them, and keep track of who owes what. Reputation becomes critical. Someone known for fair trades is trusted. Someone known for shorting portions or delaying repayment is avoided or confronted. Debt is where food becomes dangerous. Owing food creates pressure. Pressure creates tension, and tension inside prison rarely stays small. Disputes that begin over a missing item can escalate quickly because food is tied directly to survival. Losing food is not an inconvenience. It is a threat. Experienced inmates are cautious. They avoid debt when possible. They refuse trades they cannot repay. They understand that food-related conflicts can draw attention, damage standing, or invite retaliation. Survival means knowing not just how to eat, but how to avoid conflict over eating. Food also shapes alliances. Inmates often share meals or combine resources with people they trust. These small acts of cooperation build bonds. Eating together, when possible, creates a sense of normalcy and solidarity in an environment designed to isolate. Over time, food sharing can turn acquaintances into allies. But alliances are fragile. When resources run low, generosity disappears. Hunger sharpens self-interest. Inmates who were friendly when food was available may become distant when scarcity hits. Prison teaches that survival comes first, even at the cost of relationships. Guards and administrators understand these dynamics. Food is one of the most effective tools for managing large populations. A predictable meal schedule stabilizes movement. A decent meal can reduce tension. A delayed meal can increase it. Food service becomes a pressure valve, tightened or loosened as needed. This power is rarely acknowledged openly, but it is well understood. When lockdowns occur, food delivery becomes a focal point. Trays arriving late can raise anxiety across an entire unit. Missing items can trigger complaints. Consistency becomes more important than quality. Inmates may accept bad food, but unpredictability is harder to tolerate. Punishment often involves food indirectly. Loss of commissary access is one of the most effective disciplinary measures. It does not involve physical force, but its impact is immediate. Removing the ability to supplement meals increases dependence on the tray and reduces autonomy. For inmates already struggling, this can be devastating. In some systems, restricted diets are used as discipline, still legal, still meeting minimum requirements, but intentionally unpleasant. The message is clear: behavior affects food. This reinforces hierarchy. Those who follow rules maintain access. Those who don't lose it. Over time, inmates internalize this structure. Food becomes a reminder that compliance has tangible benefits, while resistance carries physical consequences. Inside housing units, food also shapes identity. Some inmates pride themselves on endurance. They refuse commissary and rely only on state meals as a point of strength. Others pride themselves on creativity, assembling meals that look impressive despite limited ingredients. Some use food to build influence, distributing items strategically to maintain goodwill. Each approach signals something. Endurance signals toughness. Creativity signals intelligence. Generosity signals confidence. But all of them are responses to the same reality. Food is power. Even eating habits become observed. Someone who eats too quickly may be seen as inexperienced. Someone who saves food skillfully is seen as disciplined. Someone who wastes food is often judged harshly. Nothing goes unnoticed because nothing is trivial when resources are limited. Over long sentences, these dynamics harden. Inmates learn who can be trusted, who cannot, and who survives comfortably versus barely. Food patterns reveal information without words. They show who has support on the outside, who is isolated, and who is vulnerable. This knowledge affects safety. Inmates who appear hungry or desperate may be targeted for exploitation. Those with resources may be pressured. Navigating this landscape requires constant awareness. Survival is not just about calories, it is about perception. What's striking is how normalized all of this becomes. From the outside, it may sound extreme. Inside, it is routine. Food hierarchy blends into daily life the same way counts, doors, and schedules do. It becomes part of the background, always present, rarely questioned. And yet, this system shapes behavior as powerfully as any rulebook. Food teaches inmates how to negotiate, when to share, when to refuse, and when to stay silent. It teaches them who holds influence and who does not. It teaches them how fragile stability can be. By the time an inmate understands these dynamics fully, prison food is no longer just about survival. It is about position. And once food defines position, it inevitably affects something deeper: mental health, dignity, and identity. That is where the cost of survival becomes harder to measure. The psychological cost of eating to survive. Hunger doesn't just affect the body. It reshapes the mind. By the time inmates fully understand how prison food works, the physical adaptation has already begun. The body has learned to cope with less. The stomach has adjusted. Energy levels have stabilized at a lower baseline. But mentally, something deeper is happening. Something slower, quieter, and far more lasting. Prison food introduces constant scarcity into everyday life. Not starvation, not emergencies, but a steady, controlled lack. Meals arrive, but they never fully satisfy. Portions are enough to continue, not enough to feel secure. This creates a background tension that never fully disappears. Hunger becomes part of the mental environment, like noise you eventually stop noticing but never escape. This kind of scarcity changes how people think. Inmates begin to plan obsessively around food, not in dramatic ways, but in small, repetitive calculations that fill mental space. What time is dinner? How long until commissary? Should I eat this now or later? Will this be enough to last the night? These thoughts repeat daily, sometimes hourly, quietly occupying attention that could otherwise go toward rest, reflection, or self-control. Over time, this mental load becomes exhausting. Scarcity narrows focus. When the brain is preoccupied with basic needs, it has less capacity for patience, long-term thinking, or emotional regulation. Small irritations feel larger. Delays feel personal. Frustration builds faster and lasts longer. Prison environments already amplify stress. Food scarcity sharpens it. This is why food-related issues trigger such strong emotional reactions inside prison. A missing item on a tray can feel like an insult. A delayed meal can provoke anger that seems disproportionate from the outside. But inside, these moments touch something deeper. The constant awareness that control is limited and security is fragile. Food also affects dignity. On the outside, eating is a personal act. You choose what you eat, when you eat, and how much you eat. Inside prison, those choices disappear. Meals are predetermined. Portions are fixed. Timing is enforced. Even posture, where you sit, how you hold your tray, is regulated. This loss of autonomy accumulates psychologically. Being forced to accept whatever is placed in front of you, regardless of preference or need, sends a quiet message. Your comfort does not matter. Over time, repeated exposure to this message erodes self-worth. Inmates may not articulate it this way, but they feel it. Food becomes a daily reminder of reduced agency. Some inmates respond by emotionally detaching. They stop caring about taste, variety, or satisfaction. Eating becomes mechanical, something to be done quickly and forgotten. This detachment helps protect against disappointment, but it also dulls emotional responsiveness. When food loses meaning, pleasure loses meaning too. Life flattens. Others respond in the opposite way. They fixate. They become hyper-aware of every detail of meals. They talk about food constantly, plan extensively, and react strongly to changes. This fixation gives the mind something to hold on to, a sense of involvement in an otherwise controlled environment. But it also increases stress when expectations aren't met. Neither response is wrong. Both are adaptations. Food scarcity also reshapes relationships with control. In prison, control is taken away in nearly every domain. Food is one of the few areas where inmates can still make small decisions. When to eat, what to save, what to trade. These decisions take on exaggerated importance because they represent rare opportunities for agency. This is why food preparation, even improvised, feels meaningful. Mixing items, seasoning food, timing meals carefully. These acts restore a sense of participation in one's own life. They are not about culinary creativity. They're about psychological survival. But the need to constantly assert control comes at a cost. When control is scarce, losing it feels devastating. A spilled tray, a confiscated item, a denied commissary order can trigger emotional reactions that seem excessive but are rooted in accumulated deprivation. Each loss reinforces the feeling of powerlessness. Over long sentences, this can harden into resignation. Some inmates stop trying altogether. They eat whatever arrives, stop planning, stop adapting. On the surface, this looks like acceptance. Internally, it often reflects emotional withdrawal, a protective response to long-term scarcity and disappointment. This withdrawal can resemble depression, low motivation, flattened affect, reduced interest in routine. Food becomes fuel only, stripped of any emotional significance. Inmates in this state are not necessarily weaker. They're conserving psychological energy in an environment that drains it relentlessly. Others channel the stress outward. They become irritable, confrontational, or hypervigilant. Hunger sharpens aggression, and aggression becomes a way to reclaim space and respect. This response carries obvious risks, but for some, it feels preferable to numbness. Food scarcity also affects self-identity. Inmates begin to see themselves through the lens of survival. Someone who manages food well is seen as disciplined. Someone who struggles is seen as weak or inexperienced. These labels influence how inmates see themselves and how others treat them. Over time, identity narrows. Instead of being defined by skills, interests, or values, people become defined by coping strategies. He always saves food. He never trades. He can't handle hunger. These judgments, repeated daily, shape social standing and self-perception. What's rarely acknowledged is how deeply this mindset can persist. Former inmates often report that food anxiety follows them long after release. They eat quickly. They hoard snacks. They feel uneasy when meals are delayed. Even with access to abundance, the brain remains wired for scarcity. This is not weakness. It is conditioning. Years of eating under constraint train the mind to expect loss. Trusting food again, trusting that it will be there when needed, takes time. For some, it never fully returns. From a systems perspective, these psychological effects are secondary. As long as inmates are fed within legal guidelines, deeper impacts are rarely considered. Mental health services may exist, but the daily environment continues to reinforce scarcity. Food remains a tool of order, not wellness. For inmates, the psychological cost accumulates quietly. There are no dramatic breakdowns tied directly to meals. Instead, there is gradual erosion of patience, of dignity, of emotional flexibility. Hunger becomes background stress, always present, rarely acknowledged. And yet, despite this cost, survival continues. Inmates find ways to adapt, to cope, to preserve pieces of themselves in small acts of choice and control. They laugh about bad meals. They share food when they can. They develop rituals around eating that bring structure to empty time. These adaptations are not signs that the system works. They are signs that people are resilient. But resilience has limits. And when food scarcity intersects with long sentences, poor health, and constant control, the psychological toll becomes impossible to ignore. Prison food doesn't just sustain bodies, it reshapes minds. That is why discussions about prison food cannot stop at nutrition or cost. They must include mental survival. Because in prison, eating is never just about staying alive. It is about staying human. Why prison food is not the same for everyone. From the outside, prison food is often spoken about as if it were a single, universal experience. 3 meals a day, identical trays, the same bland menu everywhere. But inside the system, inmates learn quickly that prison food is not equal, and survival depends heavily on where you are housed, how long you're sentenced, and what level of control surrounds you. The food itself may come from the same supply chain, but the experience of eating changes dramatically from one facility to another. Security level is the first dividing line. In minimum and some medium security facilities, meals are often served in cafeterias. Inmates walk in lines, carry trays, and sit at shared tables. Portions may still be limited, but the environment allows for small freedoms. Choosing where to sit, eating at a normal pace, occasionally talking. These small elements of normalcy matter more than people realize. In higher security facilities, that experience disappears. Meals are often delivered directly to cells. Trays are slid through slots and steel doors. There's no social space, no shared environment, no sense of a meal being an event. Eating becomes isolated, mechanical, and silent. The same food that might feel tolerable in a cafeteria feels heavier when eaten alone in a concrete cell. Isolation amplifies scarcity. When inmates eat alone, there is no opportunity to trade, share, or supplement meals informally. There is no ability to combine resources on the spot. If something is missing from the tray, there is no alternative. Hunger becomes more immediate, more personal, and more psychologically intense. Sentence length changes everything. Short-term inmates often struggle at first, but they retain a sense of temporariness. They know the system is finite. Even bad food feels survivable when there's an end in sight. Hunger is tolerated as part of a countdown. Long-term inmates experience food differently. When years stretch into decades, repetition becomes its own burden. The same menus cycle endlessly. The same portions arrive day after day. Over time, the lack of variety wears down morale. Meals stop marking progress and start marking stagnation. Food becomes another reminder that time is not moving forward in meaningful ways. For inmates serving life sentences, food becomes part of a permanent reality. There is no release date to anchor expectations. No future meal outside prison to imagine. Every tray represents not just the present, but the rest of life. This realization deepens the psychological weight of scarcity. Survival strategies shift from temporary coping to lifelong adaptation. Housing assignments also affect access. Inmates placed in work details, kitchens, maintenance, grounds often experience food differently. Kitchen workers may have limited exposure to leftovers or extra portions, depending on the facility and rules. This creates informal privilege, not abundance, but relief. Even small additions, a piece of bread, an extra scoop, can significantly improve daily survival. This privilege is closely guarded. Kitchen jobs are competitive. Losing one can feel devastating, not because of status, but because of food security. Administrators are aware of this and use job assignments strategically. Food access becomes another layer of behavioral control. Disciplinary status further widens the gap. Inmates placed in segregation or under disciplinary restrictions often face reduced food options. Meals may be simplified. Commissary access is frequently suspended. Eating becomes even more constrained, and hunger becomes sharper. For inmates already struggling physically or mentally, this shift can be overwhelming. The justification is always the same. Rules were broken, consequences follow. But the effect is predictable. Removing food flexibility increases stress, resentment, and desperation. While the intent is control, the result is often deeper psychological strain. Food scarcity becomes punishment layered on top of confinement. Medical needs complicate the picture. Inmates with chronic illnesses require specialized diets, but options are limited. Diabetic meals may still rely heavily on starches. Heart-healthy diets may still include processed foods. While prisons attempt compliance, true nutritional care is difficult to achieve within cost and supply constraints. This leaves many inmates managing health conditions with inadequate tools. Some skip meals to avoid blood sugar spikes. Others eat despite consequences because hunger is unbearable. Food becomes a daily negotiation between immediate survival and long-term health, one that inmates must navigate largely on their own. Geography also matters. Facilities in different regions operate under different budgets, contracts, and suppliers. Some prisons outsource food service to private companies focused on cost efficiency. Others maintain in-house operations. The difference shows. Portions vary. Quality varies. Consistency varies. Inmates talk about these differences constantly. Transfers between facilities are often accompanied by commentary about food. This place feeds better. That place starves you. These assessments are not exaggerations. They're survival observations. Over time, inmates learn which environments are harsher and which are marginally more tolerable. Age introduces another layer. Younger inmates may compensate for poor nutrition with physical resilience. They recover faster. They adapt quicker. Older inmates struggle more. Digestion slows. Energy drops. Chronic conditions worsen. What was survivable at 25 becomes punishing at 55. For aging inmates, prison food accelerates decline. Meals designed for minimal standards do not adjust for aging bodies. Calcium, protein, and nutrient needs increase, but portions remain static. Over years, this imbalance contributes to frailty and illness. Survival becomes quieter, slower, and more fragile. Mental health intersects with all of this. Inmates dealing with anxiety, depression, or trauma often experience appetite changes. Some lose interest in food entirely. Others eat compulsively when food is available. The rigid meal system offers little flexibility for these variations. Psychological distress and nutritional stress feed into each other. Over time, disparities compound. An inmate in a high-security unit serving a life sentence without commissary access, managing chronic illness, and eating alone experiences prison food very differently from someone in a lower security facility with resources and work privileges. The tray may look similar, but the impact is not. This is why discussions about prison food must move beyond generalizations. There's no single prison food experience. There is only a system that produces layers of survival, with some inmates barely coping and others enduring with slightly more stability. The differences are not random. They are structured by policy, security, and control. From the system's perspective, this variability is acceptable. Minimum standards are met. Legal requirements are satisfied. The rest is considered an internal matter. But for inmates, these differences define daily life. They determine energy levels, health outcomes, and psychological resilience. Food becomes a mirror of the prison system itself. Controlled, unequal, predictable, unforgiving. And as inmates compare experiences, share stories, and adjust expectations, one truth becomes clear. Survival is not just about what's on the tray. It's about where you are, how long you're staying, and how much control the system allows you to have. Once inmates understand this, they stop asking whether prison food is good or bad. They ask whether it is manageable. And for many, the answer changes over time. Because as sentences stretch on and bodies age, even manageable survival begins to feel uncertain. That is when the question shifts again from how to survive on prison food to whether the system ever intended survival to be sustainable at all. Surviving one tray at a time. Prison food is rarely discussed in terms of survival. Yet for millions of incarcerated people, it defines everyday life more than almost anything else. It is the first thing you think about in the morning, the marker that divides long hours of confinement, and the last reminder at night that control does not belong to you. What makes prison food powerful is not just what is served, but what it represents. Every tray reflects a system built on minimums. Minimum nutrition, minimum comfort, minimum choice. It keeps the body functioning, but it rarely supports the body's long-term health. It fills the stomach, but often leaves the mind restless. And over time, it teaches a lesson that reaches far beyond eating. Survival inside prison depends on adaptation, not fairness. Throughout this documentary, we've seen that prison food is not simply about taste or quality. It shapes energy levels, health, behavior, relationships, hierarchy, and identity. It creates scarcity where planning becomes essential, where dignity is negotiated daily, and where control is exercised quietly through routine. For inmates, learning how to survive on prison food becomes part of learning how to survive prison itself. The effects do not end when the sentence does. Many former inmates carry food anxiety long after release, eating quickly, saving food unnecessarily, or feeling uneasy when meals are delayed. These habits are not quirks. They are evidence of long-term conditioning. The body and mind remember scarcity long after it disappears. From a system's point of view, prison food does its job. It meets legal requirements. It maintains order. It keeps costs predictable. From an inmate's point of view, it becomes a daily test of patience, creativity, restraint, and resilience. Somewhere between those two perspectives lies a reality that is rarely acknowledged. Survival inside prison is not accidental. It is learned. Food, in this environment, becomes more than nourishment. It becomes timekeeping. It becomes currency. It becomes control. And for those living behind bars, it becomes one of the clearest reminders that incarceration is not just about confinement. It is about managing every basic human need. Understanding prison food helps us understand incarceration itself, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience shaped by repetition, limitation, and adaptation. It shows how systems affect bodies and minds quietly, over time, without dramatic moments, just slow, daily pressure. In the end, prison food tells a simple truth. People will find ways to survive, even under the strictest conditions. But survival should not be mistaken for wellness, and endurance should not be confused with dignity. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.